and welcome to Business Line. There will be change in Cuba, so said Barack Obama during his historic three-day visit to the island. He's the first sitting US president to go there since the 1959 revolution, followed by decades of hostility between the two countries. Cuba is now opening up not just to diplomatic and slowly but surely economic cooperation, but also to tourists. They are being lured there by its picturesque views and beaches. So in this edition of Business Line, we will guide you step by step through what you need to know to visit the island where the US first family spent their spring break.
Barack Obama's trip to Havana has been a checklist of firsts, and day two racked up another historic moment. After meeting President Raul Castro, he held talks with his Cuban counterpart before meeting the press, though remained deliberately vague on what progress was made during the talks.
President Castro, you said in Panama that we might disagree on something today on which we would agree tomorrow. And that's certainly been the case over the past 15 months and the days leading up to this visit. And today I can report that we continue to move forward on many fronts when it comes to normalizing relations.
The unprecedented press conference marked a departure from the norm for Castro, unaccustomed to answering questions from the US media. When a reporter grilled him on political prisoners, he was clearly flustered, saying, "Give me the list right now of those political prisoners in order to release them. Give it to me right now." "What political prisoners? Give me their names. When the meeting is over, give me the list with their names. And if they're there, by the end of the night, they'll be free." Castro took the opportunity to decry America's lack of universal health care. While Obama admitted the US had shortcomings, he also defended what he called the universal desire for democracy. On the two biggest sticking points, the economy and human rights, neither leader appeared to give any ground.
At the very end of 2014, Cuba and the US agreed to restore diplomatic ties. Since then, there have been endless headlines on tourism in Cuba, alongside a reduction of travel restrictions for US citizens. And that's where we start. Can Americans freely visit Cuba now? Not really. They are limited by 12 categories of authorized travel, such as educational and cultural exchanges. This means most of them don't get beyond Havana. For the Americans, Cuba is still not libre. For Europeans, it's easier. To go to Cuba, you just apply for a single-entry 30-day tourist visa. A confirmed return flight and booked accommodation are required. Interestingly, citizens of Montenegro and Serbia can stay in Cuba for 90 days without a visa. Travelers from Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Georgia, Russia and some other countries don't need a visa at all for a stay of up to 30 days. So, once the paperwork is sorted out, it's time to book a flight. As there are no travel restrictions from Europe, the region's airlines fly direct to the island. Fares from the US could drop as much as half due to the warming relations. Several American airlines have already applied to fly additional routes. Currently, flights from the United States to Cuba cost an average of $700 round trip. It may not be dramatically cheaper to come from Europe, but it is certainly easier. After your flight is booked, accommodation is next. And here, things have already started to change.
US-based Starwood signed a deal with Cuba's government to run two nationalized hotels in Havana. It'll spend millions to modernize the Angleterra and Fifth Avenue hotels, becoming the first American company to invest heavily in Cuba since the 1959 Communist Revolution. The US Treasury Department's exempted Starwood from Washington's economic embargo.
We are extremely excited to share the news that Starwood is going to be first in Cuba. We will operate two hotels here in Cuba, one under the Luxury Collection brand and the other one for our 4 Points by Sheraton brand.
At the same time, Booking.com's parent company, Priceline Group, became the first US online travel agency to strike a deal with Cuba's government, making hotel rooms available to US customers. However, the problem is the limited amount of accommodation, just 63,000 hotel rooms.
The Havana today is full. They receive more than 4 million tourists per year. I mean, 3.9 million was last year, and this year is going to be much more with the application of probably more than 100 daily flights from the U.S. If that happens, clearly the amount of travelers to Havana and Cuba will skyrocket.
Addressing that hotel room shortage, online lodging service Airbnb has been renting private dwellings to Americans, adding 4,000 homes over the last year, again after receiving special authorization from the US government. And now it will open up that market to travelers from the rest of the world.
Now you know how to get to Cuba and what accommodation is available. How about some travel tips? Money can be the biggest confusion. You may have heard that an average salary in Cuba is about $25 per month, and this could make you think that everything is extremely cheap there. Well, yes and no. Cuba has a dual currency system. The locals use the peso to buy goods, while visitors use the convertible peso, which is worth more than the local peso. It's equal to $1 US. But there are also fees to pay. 3% for all currency exchange and an additional 10% penalty for dollars. Cuban officials have they said that high exchange rate fee for dollars will be abolished. Considering all this, you might think that now is the time to go to Cuba before the McDonald's start popping up by those beautiful beaches. And you can still rent a room from the locals to experience the authentic Cuban atmosphere. I've got to say, you're not alone. Since Cuba and the US agreed to restore diplomatic ties, tourist numbers have risen dramatically as more and more people head to the Caribbean island before its Americanization. Around 1 million have visited since the start of 2016. And what about technology there? This is it. This is IT.
When Barack Obama and his family landed on Cuban soil, they were not alone. Accompanying the U.S. president were executives from tech companies that are looking to expand into the island. PayPal CEO Daniel Schulman announced they will make money transfer service Xoom available in Cuba by the end of this year. The payments platform noted how crucial this could be for a country that receives annual remittances from the U.S. worth up to $2 billion. Google set up a studio filled with laptops, smartphones and virtual reality headsets at the complex run by one of Cuba's most famous artists. The initiative, which will offer free internet access at speeds nearly 70 times faster than currently available to the public, is part of a wider effort to expand that access. Cuba is one of the least digitally connected nations in the world. Barely 5% of Cubans can connect to the internet at home, according to U.S. officials. Since last summer, the government has set up dozens of pay-as-you-go public Wi-Fi hotspots around the country. But an access card sold by the state phone company Etexa costs about $2 per hour, while the average state salary in Cuba is about $20 a month. That was it. That was IT.
That was it for now. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.